All right. So you sent over some information on this Billy Jackson guy and the whole network around him. And this is some really fascinating stuff. So we wanted to do like a deep dive, into this investigative article that you sent over.
Yeah.
And just really try to unpack what is going on here.
Right.
Identify the key players, all the companies involved. And just like get a really clear understanding of this whole financial mismanagement thing that the article is talking about.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest question that really jumped out to us was, how in the world does Billy Jackson keep convincing people to invest in these ventures?
Yeah.
That's the puzzle that we want to try to solve for you today.
Yeah, and it is a fascinating puzzle, and as we've dug into this piece, it's really the interconnectedness of all of these elements that becomes so striking.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about Billy Jackson himself,
right?
But this whole ecosystem of players that seem to be involved.
Yeah, so let's start with the man himself, Billy Jackson. The article kind of paints him as being a bit elusive. They even said that he declined a meeting request. So right off the bat, you get this impression of someone who's not really interested in being in the public eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is the contrast that we see in terms of his visible profile. There's this one single photo from a while back that's connected with new Capital Link.
Right.
And now there's this new, more polished image associated with Verdant Global. And just generally speaking, a real lack of any kind of online presence, for him or his companies.
Yeah.
So it really does make you wonder why he's trying to fly under the radar.
Yeah, it's so strange. And then this is where it gets really weird.
Yeah.
Despite this seeming desire to stay out of the public eye, he lists his home address on company's house for all of his businesses.
Right.
That's so bizarre. You think someone who wants to keep a low profile wouldn't just
You'd think they'd want to keep that under wraps. It's almost like it's a psychological play,
Yeah.
Maybe the lack of a public profile creates a sense of mystery.
Right.
And then by putting this very public and normal address out there, it kind of grounds him.
Yeah.
136 Workworth Avenue, Chesterless Street, shared with his wife, Tracy.
Yeah.
It's hey, look, I'm just an average guy,
Right. Yeah.
And it might actually build trust with certain investors.
I guess so. Yeah. It's this.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah. It's very counterintuitive. Yeah. So you've got this guy who's actively avoiding any kind of public engagement.
Right.
Now he's got this kind of curated online image. But then he's listing his home address for all of his business dealings. It's
right.
What's going on here?
Yeah. It's very strange.
Yeah. So this guy is operating in the shadows, but he's still somehow managing to attract all these investors.
Exactly. And this is where we get to this really important aspect that the article highlights, which is this consistent pattern of financial distress across multiple companies that Billy Jackson has been a director of.
Yeah.
And the list is pretty telling.
Oh, yeah. Talking about Platinum Assets and Developments Limited, Northumberland Living Limited,
right?
Genesis Companies, Aventuring Climate, WH 2022 Limited, and Verdant Global. So that's a lot of entities.
That is a lot, yeah.
And the article points out this recurring theme that links them all.
Yeah, the common thread is that all of these companies rely heavily on loan notes.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there, just as a quick reminder, loan notes are basically these debt instruments.
Right.
Where you're lending money to a company, and they promise to pay you back with interest.
Exactly.
But unlike, your typical savings account, they can be super risky.
Yeah, especially when they're offered by less established companies.
Right.
Which is often the case here.
Yeah, and they're often introduced to investors through these third-party introducers.
Right.
Which can add another layer of complexity.
Yeah, definitely.
But the problem isn't necessarily the model itself. It's what happens when we look at how these loan notes have actually performed across all these different companies.
Yeah. And let's just say the performance history is pretty concerning.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
The article talks specifically about past issues with Platinum Assets and Developments and Northumberland Living.
Right.
And they've actually defaulted on payments to investors.
Yeah.
People were expecting to get interest payments and their initial investment back. And they just weren't getting it.
Exactly. And it left a lot of people in a really difficult financial situation.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really troubling.
Okay.
Even with these very public defaults.
Mm-hmm.
New loan notes connected to Billy Jackson are still being promoted.
I know. It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, how is this still happening?
It really makes you question the oversight and due diligence that's going on.
Exactly. And it should be a huge red flag for any potential investors out there.
So what's
like,
the way?
Why would this time be any different?
Right? What's changed?
Yeah, so let's get into some specific examples to really show just how bad this financial trouble is.
Okay, sounds good.
The article starts by talking about Southbrook Gas Generation Limited.
Right.
And this is a big one.
Yeah, this is a major red flag.
Yeah.
The fact that Southbrook Gas Generation was wound up by HMRC back in November of 2024.
HMRC being?
Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, so essentially the UK tax authority.
Right.
And when they take action to close down a company, it's usually because of some pretty serious issues.
So unpaid debts?
Unpaid debts, financial irregularities, that kind of thing.
Okay, and it doesn't stop there.
No, it does not.
Land registry records show even more issues, like a formal charge from the Welsh Revenue Authority.
Right.
And over £12,000 in county court claims and CCJs.
Yeah, so these county court claims and judgments against Southbrook really point to this pattern of unpaid debts.
Right.
But it's important to remember that Southbrook is just one piece of this bigger puzzle.
Right, this whole network of companies connected to Billy Jackson.
Exactly.
Okay, so the article then goes on to detail specific financial troubles for some of the other entities in the network.
Mm-hmm.
So for Platinum Assets and Developments Limited, we're talking about almost £19,000 in CCJs.
Wow.
And a bunch of unpaid loan note holders.
Yeah, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier with those defaults on investor payments.
Right. It's like the same story playing out again and again.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And this pattern of financial difficulty seems to be everywhere you look.
It does, doesn't it?
Northumberland Business Management Limited has over £48,000 in CCJs.
Wow, that's a lot.
Even Northumberland Luxury Stays, which seems like a smaller operation, has outstanding CCJs.
So it really suggests this ongoing struggle to meet financial obligations.
Across the board.
Yeah, across the board.
And then there's Platinum Energy Solutions Limited.
Okay.
Which has been wound up with almost £38,000 in unpaid judgments. Mm-hmm. And the article says there are also an unknown number of loan note creditors out there.
That's worrying.
Yeah. It's really concerning. And to make matters worse, several subsidiaries within the Genesis Companies Group have entered admin receivership.
Yeah, so just to clarify for our listeners, admin receivership is this formal insolvency procedure where administrators are appointed to basically manage a company that's having major financial difficulties.
So it's not like a one-off thing.
No, it seems to be a recurring theme.
With all these ventures.
Yeah, it's a pattern.
So when you take all of this together, this financial distress across all these different companies, all connected to the same guy.
Right.
It's a pretty worrying picture.
It is. And for anyone thinking about investing in anything connected to Billy Jackson, his track record should be like flashing red lights.
You really got to do your research.
Absolutely. Thorough independent research is essential.
Yeah. So back to that original question.
Okay.
How does Billy Jackson keep attracting investors?
Right.
Despite all of these red flags.
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question.
And the article seems to suggest that one of the key factors is this carefully structured network of enablers.
That's right. It's like a support system.
So let's dig into this network a bit.
Okay.
Who are these enablers and what exactly are they doing?
Right. So essentially, these are individuals and entities that are connected to Billy Jackson. And their involvement lends a certain level of credibility to his operations.
So it makes him look more trustworthy?
Exactly, even with all the financial issues we've talked about.
Right, so who are the main players?
Well, the article points to New Capital Link, or NCL, as a key introducer. They're actively promoting loan note products that are linked to Billy Jackson.
Interesting, and the article mentions that there was a separate investigation into NCL.
That's right.
That found all sorts of inconsistencies.
Yeah, they actually detailed those inconsistencies in their own blog.
Oh, wow. So it makes you wonder about their due diligence processes.
Absolutely. If the introducer itself has faced scrutiny and has these documented inconsistencies, how thoroughly are they really vetting the products that they're offering?
Yeah, it's not a good sign.
It definitely raises some concerns.
Then the article focuses on Intelligent Distribution Limited with Sonali Craddock and Alpha Trustee Services Limited with Mark Kidd.
Right.
And calls them key enablers.
Yes, and their past connections are pretty significant.
What do you mean?
Well, both Sonali Craddock and Mark Kidd were previously associated with the High Street Group.
Oh, wow.
Which you might remember faced a ton of regulatory scrutiny and ultimately collapsed.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the fact that they're now involved in promoting unregulated loan notes.
With Billy Jackson.
Yeah, with Billy Jackson.
That's definitely something to pay attention to.
For sure.
Oh, and there's this really interesting detail about Sonali Craddock.
Yeah, what's that?
Apparently, she asked to have her name removed from a previous blog post.
I remember that, right?
Which they initially did, but it just made people even more curious.
Yeah, it's like, why would you want to distance yourself?
Exactly.
It suggests that maybe she's aware of some potential problems.
Yeah, or maybe just doesn't want to be associated with all of this anymore.
Right. Either way, it adds another layer to this whole network around Billy Jackson.
It really does.
Yeah.
So what exactly are these enablers doing?
Okay, so according to the article, they're promoting loan notes,
okay,
acting as a security trustee, and providing general administrative support.
So they're pretty involved in the whole operation.
Yeah, they're playing a crucial role.
So explain that a little more. Like, what does each of these roles actually involve?
Sure. So the introducer, like NCL, is responsible for connecting potential investors with the investment products.
Okay.
Then you have intelligent distribution, who, through their loan note promotions, are actually marketing these opportunities to a wider audience. And then Alpha Trustee Services is acting as the security trustee, which means they're supposed to be safeguarding the investor's interests.
By doing what?
Well, they hold certain assets or guarantees on behalf of the investors.
Okay.
But the effectiveness of that protection can really vary, depending on the specific agreements and the financial health of the underlying businesses.
Right.
So you can see how the involvement of these seemingly established entities can create this air of legitimacy around Billy Jackson's operations.
Right, because otherwise people might be a bit more skeptical.
Exactly, especially given his track record.
So without these key enablers, the article suggests that Billy Jackson might have a much harder time convincing people to invest.
Absolutely. Their involvement provides this sense of security or credibility just by association.
It's like they're vouching for him.
In a way, yeah.
So investors might see these familiar names or established companies and assume that everything's been properly vetted and their investments are safe.
Yeah, but as the article points out, that might not actually be the case.
Which brings us to some really important questions that anyone thinking about investing in these types of schemes needs to ask themselves.
Absolutely.
And the article puts it really bluntly.
Okay.
If past investors are still owed money from previous ventures, why should new investors expect a different outcome?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Like, it just cuts to the heart of the issue.
It does. And the history of these ventures, with the defaults on loan notes, the winding up of companies.
It speaks for itself.
It does. And potential investors need to seriously consider why their experience would be any different
than those who have already lost money.
Exactly.
And the article gives some really good advice.
What's that?
Do your own research.
Independent due diligence.
Yeah, don't just rely on the information that you're being given.
Right. You need to be proactive.
Yeah, talk to impartial financial professionals. Dig into the financial health of the company.
Absolutely.
Do your own research on the individuals and entities involved.
Don't just take their word for it.
Yeah, and they actually provide an email address.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
For anyone who needs, like, a fact-based investigative report before they make a decision.
Okay.
Or if they think a company owes them money. It's investigations@insolvencyandlaw.co.uk.
It's a good resource to have.
Yeah. So to sum up this whole deep dive into Billy Jackson and his network.
Okay.
What are the key takeaways?
All right. So we've got Billy Jackson, who seems to be actively avoiding public scrutiny.
Yeah.
And there's this consistent pattern of financial distress across multiple companies he's been involved with.
Right.
These companies rely heavily on loan notes. And despite a track record of defaults and closures, new loan notes are still being promoted.
It's crazy, right?
It is. And I think the most important takeaway is the role of this network of enablers.
Yeah. These introducers, key figures like Intelligent Distribution and Alpha Trustee Services.
Exactly. They're the ones lending this air of legitimacy to these ventures.
Right.
And that's why Billy Jackson can keep attracting investors.
Despite all the red flags.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about the ethics of it all.
It does, doesn't it?
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
Think about the responsibility of these individuals and entities who are lending their credibility and services to these ventures with this history of financial instability and investor losses. Like, what does their continued involvement say?
Right.
And what questions should potential investors be asking them directly?
Those are good questions to think about.
Yeah, it's something to really consider as you navigate the complex world of investing.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to these kinds of schemes.
For sure.
So be careful out there.
Yeah, do your research.
And always remember to protect yourself.
Absolutely good advice.